Hello everyone. For this video, I want to talk about the essay Shitty First Drafts by Lamott. And I should remind you guys that we had a discussion board about this essay last week under um, week 3. And I just wanted to remind everyone that those discussion boards are going to be what makes up most of your participation grade for the class. So if you haven't been posting in those discussions, you can still go back and post. You might lose a couple of points for being late, but a lot better than getting a 0. You don't want to end the semester and then be like, oh, I didn't post any discussion boards, now I have a 0 for my participation grade. So make sure that you're doing that. Also, I guess I should remind everyone that we're reading this essay about shitty first drafts because we have our own draft due this Friday, the 15th. For the narrative essay, of course, if you're wondering about the narrative essay, you can look at the narrative essay assignment sheet posted under week 3, and you can also watch my video that I think I just called narrative essay for my explanation of that. But yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about writing a draft here. Why do we write drafts? What's the point of them? Why am I asking you to do one? Because, I'm sure if you guys have had to write drafts before, it's probably been a very annoying assignment. It's this kind of thing where we feel like we're just writing the essay twice, or like you hand in a draft to a teacher and then they like correct your grammar or whatever, and then you fix your grammar and then you hand it in, and it just seems like it's a very kind of stupid thing. Or like, I don't know if you guys have ever had to do the thing where you have to track changes on Microsoft Word, like you delete something and it shows the teacher like what's different. And yeah, I just feel like it's felt like busy work. It's felt like um, just sort of a bullshit assignment. I know people that have had teachers where if your grammar like isn't right in the draft, they'll give you like a C or something. Like they'll take points off or things like that in the draft. And I don't do that. That's not the way I look at it. I take the shitty first drafts approach, which we'll talk about. But let me just say first that the point of writing a draft is to get you to the final version, is to make the final version of it the best that it can be. A draft is only important in the ways that it helps us get to our best essay at the end of the day. So for this narrative essay, you guys are going to write a draft. I think our full essay is 3 pages long. I don't need 3 whole pages here. 2 pages would be solid. 1 page is pretty good. Less than 1 page, we can work with it. I can still give you some feedback. I would say try to get at least 1 page for our draft, but it definitely should not be finished. That's kind of the whole point here. A draft is a draft. It's not the finished thing. It's something that should help us get to the finished product. So you're going to submit a draft. I'm going to make comments on it. I'm going to give you feedback on it. I'm going to give you suggestions, or I'll ask questions or whatever. I'm going to do that all through Moodle. That'll all be posted on Moodle. Um, and yeah, then you'll work on finishing up the draft and getting to the final version. But drafts, it's not supposed to be perfect. I don't need it to be the full length that the essay is going to be. And yeah, I'm going to be grading it on completeness, handing it in on time, all that. I'm not going to be taking points off for like whatever if it's not how I want it. I'll let you know, maybe you can change it this way. So this way, when it's actually being graded in a more rigorous way, when I grade the final version of the essay, you'll have already gotten my feedback and you'll know like what I think about it. Okay, so let's get into this actual essay because that's where I'm getting a lot of these ideas from. So I'm just going to start reading from like towards the beginning. Yeah, actually, I'm going to start from the very beginning. So she writes, now practically even better news than that of short assignments is the idea of shitty first drafts. All good writers write them. This is how they end up with good second drafts and terrific third drafts. People tend to look at successful writers who are getting their books published and maybe even doing well financially and think that they sit down at their desks every morning feeling like $1,000,000, feeling great about who they are and how much talent they have and what a great story they have to tell, that they take in a few deep breaths, push back their sleeves, roll their necks a few times to get all the cricks out, and dive in typing fully formed passages as fast as a court reporter. But this is just the fantasy of the uninitiated. So I want to stop there because I like what she's describing here, and I think that she's right. I don't know if there's anybody that you guys consider to be a great author these days, like I don't know, maybe Stephen King or George R. R. Martin, the guy who wrote the Game of Thrones books. Even though I don't know if he was so great, maybe he would finish the 6th book. I don't know. But whoever you think of as a great author, I feel like when we imagine these people writing, if we had to think about it, we'd be like, oh, well, they're great writers. So they just sit down and they pump it out, and it's great because they're great at it. They're talented writers. And what Anne Lamott, who she's a professional writer herself, what she's telling us here is that that's just not true. And Stephen King even writes about this. I've read essays that he wrote about writing, and they all have to write drafts. They all have an editor who reads their drafts and gives them feedback, and they change things and they move things around. Nobody just sits down and just types it out perfectly the first time, you know? So if the approach that you've taken to writing essays before is, to kind of start it the night before and just try to type out a perfect essay, there's a reason that that sucks and that that's hard to do and that that's kind of impossible because that's just not how writing is. That's just not how it works. So part of the reason I like doing drafts is that it doesn't allow us to kind of procrastinate in that kind of way. I know that's something students always struggle with, something I struggle with myself. Um, so yeah, you don't want to just sit down and just try to type it out perfectly the first time because it's not possible. Nobody does that. And I think this can kind of be good news to realize because I feel like a lot of my students they think that like they suck at writing or they're just bad writers, they're bad at it because when they sit down and they try to write, it's like painful and it's hard to do and when they try to write it the first time, it doesn't come out how they want it. And what Anne Lamott is telling us here is like, well, that's just kind of how writing is. That doesn't mean that you're bad at it. That just means that you're writing. That's just how writing is. So that's one of the reasons that we write a draft. Because here's another thing too, is that once you get something on the page, even if it's stuff that you have to change later, even if you feel like you're going to delete half of it or you have to move it around, once you have something on the page, it's so much easier to work with that and change it and add to it and stuff than it is to just be looking at a blank page. So just a few things there. Okay, let's continue on. I'm going to read a couple more quotes. So I'm going to the second paragraph now. She says, very few writers really know what they're doing until they've done it. Nor do they go about their business feeling dewy and thrilled. They do not type a few stiff-up warm-up sentences and then find themselves bounding along like huskies in the snow. One writer I know tells me he sits down every morning and says to himself nicely, "It's not like you don't have a choice, because you do. You can either type or kill yourself." We all often feel like we're pulling teeth, even those writers whose prose ends up being the most natural and fluid. I like the point that she makes here that for all writers, it's like pulling teeth. It is kind of a painful process. It's weird, kind of how psychologically like damaging trying to write an essay can be. It can feel it gets very like existential very quickly. It gets I don't know. It's a very psychological thing as well. It just it feels like every word is just like you're giving your blood to it or something. It's like I don't know if you guys have seen. I think it's the fifth Harry Potter movie, but he's like in detention or something, and he has to like write lines. And he's using like a magic pen or whatever. And when he writes the lines, the words start showing up in his hand like in blood. And that's what it can feel like to write an essay sometimes. And again, this is another thing where students think that they feel that way because they suck at it. They think that the only reason it's so painful or that it's this kind of psychologically harrowing experience is because they're bad at it. But I think what she's telling us here is right, which is like, no, that's just how writing is. So that one, I don't know if that is that good news or is that bad news. On the one hand, it's not only you; everyone feels this way. I feel this way when I write essays. It's painful. It is like pulling teeth. It can be at times, and but it's so like it's good news because it's not just you. It's like that for everyone. But it's bad news because there's not like some magic key that I can like give you about writing that's going to make it fun and painless and easy all the time. It's kind of like I remember I used to think this way about like driving a car when I was a kid. Like I would see my parents driving and like the dials on the dashboard, and I would always wonder how they could keep their eyes open when the headlights came from the opposite direction because I would always close my eyes as a kid. And I would think, well, they must have some kind of special knowledge. They must have had to learn so much stuff about cars to be able to operate it. And then when I started, learning to drive myself, you realize, oh no, like everyone's just kind of out here bullshitting, like everyone's just winging it and sort of figuring it out as they go. And I think there's something similar here with writing, where there's not, some magic key that we can find that's going to make it fun and easy and quick. It's kind of like any creative thing. If you guys, if any of you do like painting or music or any other kind of art, I feel like, at least for me, and I think for a lot of other people, I think making any kind of art is sort of a love-hate relationship. Like whether it's music, painting, writing, you'll be like super into it in one moment, and you'll be like, oh yeah, like this is good. I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going with this. and then like the next day you'll look back at it and you'll be like, oh my god, like this is terrible. How could I have done this? So I think like even though essay writing doesn't feel very artistic all the time, I think it is still this kind of creative thing where anything creative that we generate, I feel like we always kind of had a love hate relationship with it, you know. So art is kind of similar that way. Yeah, she goes on to say, for me and most of the writers I know, writing is not rapturous. In fact, the only way I can get anything written at all is to write really, really shitty first drafts. And that's where the idea of shitty first drafts come in. I think this is something that can really help with writer's block. If you're someone who struggles with writer's block, you're looking at the page, you can't get anything down on it. I feel like part of the reason we have that problem is because we're trying to write something perfect the first time that we write it. If we take some of that pressure off and know that we're just doing a shitty first draft and it's gonna, get feedback from me and stuff, and that you can always go back and change it. There's still time to go back, change it, remove stuff, add stuff. I think that takes some of the pressure off, makes it easier to get started. Um, okay, so I want to go to. There's a part here in the, I think it's the fifth paragraph on the first page, where she describes her own writing process. So she's talking here about writing like a magazine article about like a food review or something. So she says, even after I'd been doing this for years, panic would set in. I'd try to write a lead, but instead I'd write a couple of dreadful sentences, X them out, try again, X everything out, and then feel despair and worry settle on my chest like an X-ray apron. It's over, I'd think to myself calmly. I'm not going to be able to get the magic to work this time. I'm ruined. I'm through. I'm toast. Maybe I think I can get my old job back as a clerk typist. Probably not. I'd get up and study my teeth in the mirror for a while. Then I'd stop, remember to breathe, make a few phone calls, hit the kitchen, and chow down. Eventually, I'd go back and sit down at my desk and sigh for the next 10 minutes. Finally, I'd pick up my 1-inch picture frame, stare into it as if for an answer, and every time the answer would come, all I had to do was write a really shitty first draft of, say, the opening paragraph. Just continuing, she says, so I'd start writing without reining myself in. It was almost just typing, just making my fingers move. So I like all the stuff that she has there. She talks about the worry and the panic and the dread that are associated with writing, and for her, this idea of it doesn't have to be perfect right now. It can be shitty, and I can fix it later. That idea makes it easy to get started. And then she says, when she does get started, it's just typing. It's just making your fingers move. I used to call this like spewing for an essay. I would say I just gotta spew some stuff onto the page, and I know it's against all of our instincts because we want to just write it perfect the first time. But I think it actually becomes easier, and you'll end up with a better essay if your initial approach is like, all right, let me just get all my thoughts down, let me get my thoughts out here, and then maybe take a couple of days, whatever. You submit the draft, I give you comments and stuff, and then you go back to it, and then you can work on finishing it up, changing it in whatever ways you want to, and it's just better to do it that way. It gives you a better essay, and it also makes it a little less painful, maybe. She says, I would eventually let myself trust the process. I like that she says, trust the process. It's the writing process. That's what she's talking about. You've got to trust the writing process. That's something we've been talking about a lot, whether it's, coming up with your thesis, making an outline, writing a draft, getting feedback, editing the paper, revising the paper. One of the real things I want to emphasize in this class is that we all kind of figure out like a plan for ourselves to write an essay, so that when in future classes you get some kind of assignment, you're not like, oh my god, what am I going to do? You're like, okay, I have these steps that I know I can go through. I can write a shitty first draft, and then I can get to my best essay at the end of that. She says on the last page, she says, then a month later, it was time for another review. The whole process would start again, complete with the fears. So I like that she emphasizes these points just about how, like, clearly she like is a good writer, and she still has these feelings. And I'm just going to read the last paragraph here to finish up. She says, almost all good writing begins with terrible first efforts. You need to start somewhere. Start by getting something, anything down on paper. A friend of mine says the first draft is the down draft. You just get it down. The second draft is the up draft. You fix it up. You try to say what you have to say more accurately. The third draft is the dental draft, where you check every tooth to see if it's loose or cramped or decayed or even, God help us, healthy. So yeah, that is the approach that I would want you guys to take for the draft that we're working on for the narrative essay. I'm not expecting them to be perfect. They can be shitty first drafts. Another thing that I would say, I feel like something that like we maybe got used to doing because of writing timed essays in school, which are the worst, obviously. But when we write timed essays, we have to like write everything in order. When we're writing an essay like this, where we're doing it over the course of a number of weeks, you don't. The first thing that you write doesn't have to be the first sentence. Doesn't even have to be the first paragraph. Start with something that you know is going to be in the essay, and then you can kind of build out from there. So yeah, I'm not looking for perfect drafts. I'm looking for shitty first drafts when you submit something on the 15th. And yeah, so I hope this approach can take some of the pressure off, make it easier to get started, and just let you know that just because writing is a painful thing sometimes, it doesn't mean that you're bad at it. It just means that you're human. All right, I guess that's it for now. I'll talk to you soon.